Hello and welcome back to the same game tutorial for Ren'Py, part 9, and let's just jump straight back into it, shall we? So in the last part of the tutorial, we finished the shift icons function, and we also started creating this scoreUI screen where we have added a timer that counts down from 60 to 0 every second, and then we're displaying that time with a text displayable on the screen. In this part of the tutorial, we are going to be implementing a score system, which is going to give the user points for each removed icon from the grid. At the end of the game, the user will also be able to review these points and be able to tell if this is considered to be a low, medium, or high score. So to implement that, we are first going to create 3 different variables. So we're going to scroll down into our start label, and then we'll create a new line here. And the first variable is going to be one that decides how many points that each removed icon should give the user. So we're going to write point, like so, and then we can set this to a value of 5, for example. The next variable is going to be one that stores how many points that the user have gotten throughout the game. So we're going to call this score, and this is going to be 0 when the game starts. The next variable is going to refer to a dictionary, and this dictionary is going to help us in determining if the user's score is a low, medium, or high score. So we're going to call this one scoring, like so. And then we're going to create 2 curly brackets to make a dictionary. And the first item in this dictionary is going to have a key, which we are going to call low. And this key is going to refer to a value, which is going to be a list. So we're going to create 2 square brackets, like so. And inside of this list, we want to create 2 items, and these are going to represent the range of points that will be considered as a low score. So for this, we're going to say 0 and 100. So a score from 0 to 100 will be a low score. And then we'll create a new item. And the key for this is going to be saying medium. And then we'll do the same thing. We will create a list for the value. And inside of here, we are going to create 2 items as well. And this time, we're going to give it the numbers 101 and 200, like so. So now the medium score will be a range from 100 to 200 points. And then we'll create the last one, which is going to be the high score. So we're going to write high. And then for the value, we'll do the same thing. We'll create a list. And then we're going to write 201 and 300, like so. So now we have defined a low, medium, and high score range. But you can of course change these to any other values if you'd rather have something else. So the next thing that we want to do is to make sure that we're adding points to the user's score whenever they are deleting matches from the grid. And to do that, we are going to go back into our delete matches function. So we're going to scroll up until we find it. Up here, and then we're going to add the points to the score. But before we do that, we have to make the score variable into a global, and to do that we are going to write global score, like so. And then inside of this for loop, we're going to say score plus equals point, like so. So now we're adding to the user score the amount of points that is stored inside of this point variable. And this will of course happen for each of the icons inside of the matches list. So now we can go ahead and go back into the scoreUI screen again to add another text displayable, which is going to show this score to the user in the game. So we're going to scroll back down into the scoreUI screen right here. And before we add this new text displayable, we are actually going to wrap it and this one into 2 frames, just so that we can make it look a little bit prettier inside of our game. So to do that, we are going to create a new line after this first statement. And then we're going to say frame. And then we'll indent this text displayable, like so. And now we can go ahead and add some properties to this frame. And the first one is going to be align. And this one expects a tuple value, so we're going to add 2 brackets like so. And then we're going to say 0.01 and 0.01, like so. And this is what we have done down here in the text displayable as well. But as we are wrapping the text in a frame, we want the frame to be positioned with these values instead of the text displayable. But as we are going to use this align property for the text displayable later on, we can leave it as it is for now. So the next property that we want to add to the frame is going to be a background property. So we're going to write background. And since I've already prepared this tutorial in advance, I've already got a color that we can use that looks good for this frame. So I'm going to add 2 quotation marks, and then I'm going to paste the color value inside of here, like so. But I have also added this color value into the description box below so that you can easily copy paste it into your project. The next property that we're going to add to this frame is going to be the XY size property. So we'll write XY size like so. And the size that we want to give this frame is going to be 250 pixels wide and 50 pixels tall. But you can of course experiment with this and put these to different values. The next one is going to be a padding property. And we're going to use this to add a padding on the inside of the frame so that when we add the second frame inside of this frame, we're going to get a sort of border around it. So we're going to add 2 pixels of padding on each side. So we're going to write 2 and 2 like so. And that is all for the properties for this frame. So now we can go ahead and add the second frame. So we're going to write frame like so. And then we'll indent this line of code right here. And now we can go ahead and add some properties to this frame as well. So the first one is going to be background. And I've already prepared a value for this one as well, so I'm going to paste it into here. But as before, this value will be available in the description box below. The next property is going to be xfill. And we're going to set this to true to make this frame expand to the whole inner width of the parent frame. And this will of course be minus the padding that the parent frame has. The next property is going to be yfill. And we're going to set this to true as well, so that we have a frame that is going to expand to the same height and width as its parent frame. The next thing we are going to add inside of this frame is actually going to be a grid displayable, and this is going to help us to show these 2 texts on the screen in a nicer way together with 2 complementary icon images. So we're going to create a new line, and then we're going to say grid, and we're going to give this 4 columns and 1 row. So we're going to write 4 and 1 like so, and then we're going to indent this line of text like so. And then we also want to add some properties to this grid, and the first one is going to be xfill as before, and we're going to set this to true. And then we're going to add a second one, which is going to be spacing, and we're going to set this to 0. And that just means how much space should be between each of the grid cells, and we want 0 in this case. And now we can go ahead and add some more content into this grid. So the first thing that we already have added is this text, which is displaying the countdown time. And then we also want to add the score as well as the 2 complementary icons. So let's go ahead and add the icon that should go in front of this countdown time text. So we're going to create a new line up here, and then we're going to say image. And the image that we want to use is going to be one from this UI folder up here, where I have added the clock icon and the coin icon. And appropriately, we would choose the clock icon to go in front of the countdown time text. So we're going to write UI clock icon.png like so. And then we want to make sure that we are aligning this image inside of its grid cell as well. And to do that, we are going to use the xAlign property. And we are going to set this to 1.0, which will align this to the right side of its cell. And then we want to go down into the text displayable, and we're going to change the align property to xAlign as well. And we will put this to the value of 0, so that it will be aligned to the left side inside of its grid cell. And now we want to make sure that we are resizing our icon image so that it is half of its original resolution, just as we have done with the other images. So we're going to say at half size, like so. So now we're using the half size transform that we created earlier for this image as well. And now we want to go ahead and add the other two displayables, which is going to be the score text as well as the coin icon. So we're going to create a new line up here, like so. And then we'll say text. And inside of here, we're going to create two square brackets, like so. And then we'll say score. And then we're going to give this the X-align property as well. And this we're going to set to 0.0 as we have done with the other one. And then we're going to give this a color, which is also going to be black. So we're going to write color and then hash symbol with 6 zeros, like so. And then we can go ahead and add the icon image as well. So we're going to create a new line and then we'll say image. And the image is going to be from the UI folder as well. And then we'll say coin icon.png. And now let's also align this inside of its cell. So we're going to say X align. And we're going to set this to 1.0. And then we're going to say at half size so that it will be half of its original resolution. So now we can go ahead and save our changes and launch the game to see what this looks like. So here inside of the game, we can now see that we both have the timer as well as the score text being shown. And then we have the two different icons which we have placed in front of them. Then we can also see that we have the two frames in the background, one which acts as the border and one which is the background color for our text and icons. But then we can also see that the texts are a little bit too high up and not really in the center of this bar. So we're going to go back into the code and lower them a bit so that it will look a little bit more tidy. So let's go ahead and change back these X-align properties into align properties instead. So we're going to say align. And then we're going to set the X position to be the same as before. So it's going to be 0.0. And then for the Y position, we're going to say 0.5. And that means that it will align in the center of the grid cell on the Y axis. And then we can go ahead and copy this and paste it into the other text down here, like so. So now our text should be centered on the Y axis. So let's go ahead and launch the game again to see what this looks like. So here inside of the game again, we can now see that both the icons and the text are aligned in the center of the Y axis. So now we can go back into the code and add one of the last things, which is going to be the hint button, which is going to allow the user to get a hint of where they can find the next matching group on the grid. So let's go back to the code and implement that. So now that we are back inside of the code again, we are going to scroll down into the SameGame screen. And then we're going to implement the hint button. So we're going to create a few empty lines underneath this add icons statement. And then we're going to go in one indentation, like so. And then we're going to say button. And then we're going to give this a few properties. And the first one is going to be XY size. And it's going to be 120 pixels wide and 40 pixels tall. The next property is going to be pause to position the button. And we're going to give it the value of 0.6 and 0.85. And this will position the button somewhere at the bottom row to the right of the grid. And then we can give it a background property. So we're going to write background. And this is going to be a white color. So we'll say hash symbol and then 6 F characters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like so. And then the next thing we are going to add is going to be the text displayable. So we're going to say text. And this is going to be hint. And we can set this to a color which is black. So we're going to write hash symbol and then 6 zeros. And then we're going to set the text size to 20 so that it's nice and visible. And then we're going to align the text inside of the button in the very center. So we're going to say align, and then we're going to give it the value of 0.5 and 0.5, like so. The next thing we want to add for this button is going to be the action property. So we're going to create a new line above this text displayable, and we're going to say action. And the action that we want to run is going to be a Python function that we haven't yet created. But to run this function, we are going to use a Ren'Py Python function, which is called function. And inside of here, we want to say what our Python function is going to be called, and we're going to call this hint. And then we're going to add one more parameter to this function, which is going to tell the Ren'Py engine to not automatically update the screens once this hint function has run. Otherwise, we are going to get some problems where some of the code inside of our hint function isn't going to properly run. So we're going to write underscore update screens is equal to false, like so. And I'm going to put a link to the documentation page where you can read more about this function and the update screens parameter. Now, before we launch the game to see what this button looks like, we're going to create this hint Python function so that we don't get any errors. So we're going to scroll back up into the init Python function, and we can create this hint function underneath our shift icons function. So we will create a few lines underneath here, like so, and then we can go inwards one indentation. And then we're going to say def hint, and for now we're going to put a pass statement in here, just so that we don't have to put any specific code right away. And then we can save our changes and launch the game to see what this looks like. So here inside of the game again, we can now see that we indeed have a hint button here down to the right, but it's not really nicely aligned to the very bottom edge of this grid, which I think would look a lot nicer, so we can fix that later on. But for now, let's go back into the code and add some code into the hint function. So what we want to do when someone presses the hint button is to find a group of matching icons on the grid, and then we want to animate these so that the user can clearly see where they are positioned on the grid. So we can go ahead and remove this pass statement, and instead we're going to create a for loop, and this for loop is going to iterate through the icons list just as we have done inside of the find matches function. But this time, instead of running it when a user clicks on an icon, we're going to run it whenever a user clicks on the hint button. So the for loop is going to iterate through the list and then find an icon that has neighboring matches. And if it can find neighboring matches to that icon, then we're going to pass that icon into the find matches function, which is going to do the rest of the job. So to make this a little bit quicker, we are going to go into the find matches function, and then we're going to copy the for loop, and then we're going to paste it into the hint function. And then we can go ahead and make some changes to this for loop so that it will work as intended. So the first thing we want to do is to say for icon in icons list, and then we're going to create a new line, and we're going to say if icon is not none, so that we're not trying to grab an icon that has been removed from the grid. And then we're going to indent these lines of code like so. And the next thing we want to do is to make sure that we are removing these not in matches conditions from the if statements, as we are no longer working with the matches list. So let's go ahead and do that for all of the if statements. Now, instead of adding the matches that we are able to find inside of these if statements into the matches list, we are going to call the find matches function, and we're going to pass the icon that had a match next to it into that function as a parameter. So in this case, we were able to find an icon that is matching to the right. So we're going to send in the icon that had that match to the right into the find matches function. So we're going to say find matches, and then we're going to say icon like so. And now we're going to do the same thing for all of the other if statements. So we can copy that, and then we'll paste it into here. Like so. And now we also want to make sure that we are breaking the loop after each of these find matches function calls, as we don't want it to keep looping afterwards. So we're going to say break, like so. And then we'll do the same thing for the rest of the if statements. Like so. And now we want to actually make sure that we are adding one more parameter into the find matches function. And this parameter is going to help us inside of the find matches function to determine if it was called based on a user clicking on an icon on the grid, or if the user clicked on the hint button. Because as we have it right now, the find matches function will delete any group of matching icons after it has found them. But in this case, if we are clicking on the hint button, we don't want these icons to be deleted. We want to animate them and then let the user choose if they want to delete them or not. So we're going to go ahead and add a new parameter to this find matches function call. So we're going to write a comma, and the value that we want to pass is going to be false, to say to the find matches function that we don't want it to delete the matches after it has found them. However, just writing false like this into the find matches function isn't really going to be easy to understand if we were to come back to this code at a later date. So to make it more understandable, we can make this into a keyworded parameter or argument by writing a keyword in front of this value and then saying that it is equal to false. So we could say, for example, delete on match is equal to false. So now we could come back to this code and see that this function takes two parameters, and one of them is a keyworded parameter that says delete on match equals to false. And this will be a little bit more easy to understand as to what this false value is supposed to do. We can do the same thing for this icon. So we could say, for example, icon equals icon, to say that we are passing in an icon value into this function. So let's go ahead and do this for the other find matches function calls as well. So I'm going to copy this and paste it here, like so. And now we also want to make sure that we are adding this delete on match parameter into the find matches function as well. So we're going to scroll back up until we find it. And then we're going to add a comma here. And then we'll say delete on match, like so. Now, because we have said down in the hint function that the first parameter for this find matches function should be named icon, we want to rename this one to icon as well. So we'll write icon, and then we'll do the same thing down here, like so. So now that we have added a second required parameter to this function, we also need to make sure that we are supplying a second parameter value to all of the find matches function calls, such as up here inside of the icons events function. And in this case, we are calling the find matches function whenever a user has clicked on an icon on the grid. And if there were any matches found in this case, then we want to make sure that they are deleted from the grid. So we're going to say comma, and we're either just going to say true or delete on match equals true. And I'm going to choose the latter, so I'm going to say delete on match equals true. And then for consistency's sake, we can go ahead and say icon equals icon as well. So now that we have that done, we want to go back into this find matches function, and we want to say if the value instead of this delete on match parameter is true, then we can go ahead and run the delete matches function. But if it's not, then we want to do something else. So we're going to add another condition to this if statement. So we're going to say and delete on match is equal to true, like so. So if the delete on match parameter does not equal to true, then that means that the user has clicked the hint button, and therefore we want to animate the matches that were found on the grid instead of deleting them. So we're going to create a new line, and then we're going to say elif for else if delete on match is equal to false. And the function that we want to run if this delete on match parameter is set to false is going to be called animate on match. And then we're going to add the matches list as a parameter. So we're going to write matches like so. So now, since this video has been going on for quite some time already, we are going to pause it here and continue in the next part where we are going to implement this animate on match function. So I thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.